So the deltoids are one of those muscles that are just super stubborn to grow. It might even seem like every single other muscle group is growing except for your shoulders. Well, don't worry, because in this video, I'm gonna give you the 3 science-based tips to help me get my shoulders from here to here. Let's get into it. Now, by the end of this video, you'll understand everything from exercise order to exercise selection, and even pressing mechanics based on what the research says. Before we get into that, let's have a quick anatomy lesson. And first off, there are 3 heads of the shoulders. So first off, there's gonna be the front delts, which is gonna be over here. Then we have the side delts, which is all of this in the center. And lastly, we have the rear delts, which is this back here. Now, understanding the 3 different heads of the deltoids is gonna help with exercise selection when we get further into these tips. Now, tip number 1 is if your front delts are dominant, start with side and rear delt exercises first. Now, you may have heard the idea that, oh, your front delts are naturally gonna be more overdeveloped because they're not only involved in shoulder pressing motions, but they're also gonna be involved in pretty much any pressing motion, including incline bench as well as flat bench press. And the common solution to that you may have heard is, well, in that case, you just do more side and rear delt exercises. But while adding additional volume on the side and rear delts is definitely a great idea, we can take it a step further by changing our exercise order. And I'm willing to bet that for a lot of you guys watching, that's probably something you're not doing, because how many shoulder workouts out there have you seen that starts with a typical shoulder press and then you move on to side delt exercise and you finish off with rear delts? Instead, I actually recommend reversing that order, starting with the rear delt exercise, then moving on to side delt and saving your front delt focused exercises for last. And according to the research, a meta-analysis done by Nunes et al. In 2020 found that exercise order significantly impacted strength and performance in a positive way for those exercises performed earlier in the session. Thus, it is logical to think that, well, better performance means likely more total mechanical tension experienced by the muscle, which should translate to better hypertrophy outcomes. So the practical takeaway from this is, regardless of whatever split you're doing, try making the first shoulder exercise you do a side or a rear delt exercise as opposed to a shoulder pressing motion. And of course, if your side and rear delts are especially lagging, you should be adding additional volume to the side and rear delts by adding perhaps 1 or 2 additional side and rear delt exercises across the week. So let me take you through a quick example workout to really nail the point home. So first off, we're gonna start out with the rear delts with a high to low reverse cable fly. I particularly like this cross-body cable variation because we get a more lengthened focused resistance profile, which I find for those that tend to not really feel their rear delts when they're training it, you tend to feel it more as you approach failure on a lengthened focus exercise. I don't know why. It might literally just be pseudoscience, but honestly, any other rear delt exercise would suffice as well. And then for the second exercise, I'm gonna clip my mic over here for a sec. We're gonna be doing a chest-supported dumbbell lateral raise, raising slightly in our scapular plane as our main side delt exercise. Now, specifically, this is gonna be a short and focused lateral raise exercise, which we will talk about later in this video, so stay tuned for that. And then lastly, of course, we're finishing off with a dumbbell shoulder press as our main front delt biasing exercise. And of course, we're doing this last because, like I mentioned before, we want to be prioritizing these side and rear delts. And in many cases, depending on what split you're following and how much you want to be prioritizing the side and rear delts, you could probably get away with weaving a couple other side and rear delt exercises before you actually shoulder press. Now, of course, this was a very rough example workout. Not everyone's going to be doing all their shoulder volume in one day, especially if you're doing PPL, full body, upper lower, which is why I ultimately recommend. But I think you get the idea. If you're going to be doing a shoulder exercise on that day, you want to be starting out with side and rear delts instead of front delts if side and rear delts are an underdeveloped muscle. Also, something that goes hand in hand with some nice boulder shoulders are nice fitting gym wear, which is why I recommend you check out Abel's summer sale that is going live Monday, July 28th at 2 p.m. EST. It is up to 60% off site-wide, men's and women's. They have a range of stringers, tank tops, or if you want the more subtle attained seamless line, which I've been rocking every single day in my latest TikToks, as you have probably seen, they will be restocking in time for the sale. So if you want to check that out, you can get an additional 10% off on top of whatever sale they have going on during the summer sale by using code PATH. It would be much appreciated. It's a great way to support my page. So check that out if you're interested, and act quickly because they tend to go out of stock on the really nice stuff pretty quickly. Back to the video. Now, tip number 1 is more about workout programming, but tip number 2 is gonna be about specifically these side delts, and that is incorporate both lengthened focused and shortened focused side delt exercises. Now, a lot of people usually think in terms of dumbbell lateral raises versus cable lateral raises, when in reality, why not have both? Now, while it is common to be favoring more stretch biasing exercises right now due to all the recent commotion about stretch-mediated hypertrophy and just getting a good stretch on the muscle in general, a 2024 study found some interesting nuances. Now, this study basically compared the difference in side delt growth between dumbbell lateral raises and cable lateral raises, and they found that overall hypertrophy was pretty much the same across both exercises. And of course, we shouldn't base everything off of one study, especially when it's only 8 weeks long. However, the interesting part is that there were slight differences between the dumbbell and cable lateral raise when it came to regional hypertrophy. Specifically, cable saw more side delt growth in the distal region of the side delts, while the dumbbells saw more side delt growth in the proximal region. In other words, we can potentially be biasing different regions within these side delts by changing the resistance profile of that side delt exercise. Which means the practical takeaway from all of this is you should be incorporating both short and focused side delt exercises such as a dumbbell lateral raise, as well as more length and focused ones such as a machine or a cable lateral raise set to hand height. Now, specifically when it comes to that length and focused cable lateral raise, we can go even further by raising the cable up to hand height, like so, as this was the specific variation done in the study. And when it comes to the dumbbell lateral raise, pretty much any variation will work. You can do it seated or standing or even chest support like the one I like to do, since they're all going to be pretty much short and focused because we're bound by gravity. And a quick tip within the tip, if you want to kind of further optimize for hypertrophy at a programming level, ideally you should be spreading these side delt exercises across 2 different workout days so that you're increasing your frequency to 2 times per week, as well as hitting, of course, 8 to 20 sets of side delts per week. But I assume you already watched this video and you already knew that. And since we're already on the topic of overall optimization, if you truly want to maximize overall shoulders growth, you need to be making sure your nutrition is locked down. And a very simple way to do this, at least one easy metric that you should be thinking about, is hitting your daily protein intake. Now, I generally recommend aiming for 0.8 grams of protein per pound of lean body weight on a daily basis. And a great way to get an additional 20 grams of protein-ish in a pretty convenient and easy and good tasting way is by having a nice third-party tested high-quality protein powder. Like the ones from MyProtein, they have an array of different protein powders from pretty much any price point and any kind of taste. From more traditional milky ones like the Impact Whey line to the more juice-like flavors that doesn't even seem like protein powder in the first place, like the Clear Whey line. But anyways, if you're interested, you can use code TYLERPath to get a pretty hefty discount. Otherwise, all I ask is you like this video, as it is a great free way to support my page and helps me to continue making these videos. Let's get back to tip number 3. Now, tip number 3 is going to be about the front delts, and that is if you get shoulder pain on shoulder press, you should be pressing in your scapular plane. I feel like many lifters almost default to pressing out here in their frontal plane, thinking that anything different than that, if you're pressing more forward, it's just going to be like worse for your front delts. But the research says otherwise. Now, to explain what scapular plane pressing is in the context of a shoulder press, that is essentially when you're pressing with your arms slightly in front of your body here, as opposed to completely flared out to the side over here. Now, a great way to dictate this is by turning your wrists slightly inwards as here, so that naturally your elbows would track a little bit more in front of your body. Now, a systematic review of glenohumeral moment arms found that the front delts has significant leverage to do humeral elevation. That is basically what the upper arm does during a shoulder pressing motion across various shoulder angles. Therefore, suggesting that there shouldn't be much difference in front delt recruitment between pressing in your frontal plane all the way out here, as opposed to your scapular plane over here. And the practical takeaways from this for the front delts is a couple things. First off, scapular plane pressing seems to have no disadvantage from a front delt perspective. However, keep in mind that your side delts will be slightly less involved, but I don't like including shoulder pressing in my side delt volume anyway, so it doesn't really matter for me. And the second thing is simply choose the pressing angle that's most comfortable for you. If you have no problems with frontal plane pressing, then continue doing it. But if you tend to get shoulder pain when you're doing a shoulder press, try pressing more in your scapular plane. And if you want an overall recommendation, I probably would just go with scapular plane pressing, just because it's the more conservative advice out of the two. You probably can get an even better range of motion technically. Now, you're thinking right now, Tyler, you know, all the systematic review and mental analysis and science-based stuff is cool and all, but look, I just want you to create a workout program for me. I just want you to give more guidance on what I should do from a dieting perspective. And I just want my questions answered. Well, if that is you, I highly recommend you apply to my exclusive one-on-one fitness coaching program, where I pretty much do just that. I'm gonna put some results from my past clients on screen right now, and if you're interested, you can apply. Link is in the description. All right, so to recap those 3 tips so it really hits home. First off, Prioritize side and rear delt exercises, not only by adding more volume, but by starting out with those exercises before you get onto your front delt focusing ones. Number 2, when it comes to side delt growth, it is not which lateral raise exercise is better, dumbbell versus cable. Instead, do both to capitalize on the potential regional hypertrophy differences. And number 3, don't force pressing in the frontal plane if it's causing you pain. Scapular plane pressing is a completely valid option too. Now this video is very short and sweet to the point, but considering that you're training hard enough, I bet that you implementing these tips is definitely gonna lead to overall better deltoid growth. Good luck. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.